Hello and welcome to the D
and A of Home Interiors, the podcast which is all about empowering you to make confident interior and furnishing decisions for your home. I'm Audrey, founder of Audrey Whelan Interior Design.
And I'm Deirdre, founder of youfurnish.com, such 100 plus furniture retailers on one website. The DNA of Home Interiors is proudly sponsored by checkatrade.com. If you need help with your next home improvement project, you can search from over 39,000 recommended, vetted and monitored trades on checkatrade.com. So today we are delighted to have Jane Perrone, a journalist specialising in plants and gardening. Her work was recently published in The Guardian, The Financial Times, Gardens Illustrated and Garden Design Journal. In addition, Jane runs her very own podcast called On the Ledge, covering the world of houseplants, from cacti to succulents and ferns. Jane, very welcome today.
Hello, great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you today. If you've listened to some of our podcasts, Jane, you'll realise that I haven't got the best track record with houseplants.
That's okay, I'm here to help.
I was very, very excited to speak with you. And I suppose the first question is, houseplants should be for everybody. We're now living in our homes more than ever. Maybe what are the beginning? What are the few rules that we should think about when we're buying a plant? And, you know, it might be the north-facing or south-facing aspect of a room, etc. But where do I begin if I'm like, I've got no plants, I've got no history, but I want some? What's my first thought as a consumer?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. As interiors people, you're already thinking probably about, what's the light like in this room? And that's really a key consideration for plants, because light is life to a houseplant. So look around, wander around your house and think about where you want to have plants. And then think about how much light that area is getting. And, you know, if you happen to have a light meter kicking around in your house, then you can use that to find out how light it is. But you can also just use your eyes. Which way is the window facing? Is it a big window, a small window? How much have you got in the way of blinds and net curtains and curtains that are going to stop light coming in? And think about what plants might suit that particular area. So I'm sitting here in my office, which is actually quite gloomy. I do have some extra lights, but on the windowsill, which is the lightest windowsill, I've got some of my cacti and succulents, which like lots and lots of light, but in winter they like to be cool. So they're out here in the office, which you can probably see when you can, not very good for a podcast, but I'm wearing a massive hoodie here because it's cold out here, because I keep it cold because my succulents are out here. The things I do for my plants. So yeah, think about the light in the room. There are plants that will grow in quite dark rooms, but there aren't that many of them. And some of the things that people say are ideal for dark rooms, they'll be okay. But for example, the snake plant, Sansevieria, in fact, it's been redefined as Dracaena. Long story. Anyway, the snake plant, I'm not going to use its other common name because it's tremendously sexist, but it starts with the word mother. That plant is often described as being a plant that you can grow in dark corners. And it will sit in a dark corner and sulk and not grow. But if you put that in a sunny windowsill, it'll grow beautifully. So think about your plants and think about the room that you've got and the amount of light, and then choose your plants accordingly. And it's very tempting, isn't it? We all go into the garden centre and think, oh, look at this beautiful thing. I love it. I've fallen in love with it. Isn't it amazing? And then we don't actually find out anything about it and bring it home. And then we're sad when it dies. So do your research and you'll save yourself a lot of plant death along the way.
Jane, I'm so curious about what you just said about dark rooms, because I feel, you know, obviously with this influx of plants we're seeing in interiors imagery, so a lot on Instagram,
oh God,
more in
don't get me started.
You know, even like, you know, furniture websites now are full of plants as well, you know, as accessories. But one thing that I get questions a lot on, and I've started to wonder actually for myself now as well, is, you know, we're seeing plants in bathrooms, which, you know, used to just never be a thing, really. But often people's bathrooms have no natural light. So is it actually possible to put plants in that type of room?
That's a really good question. Well, all plants need some form of light. So if you have a bathroom with no window, light levels are going to be incredibly low in there. You are going to get some natural light because presumably the door's going to be open some of the time. There will be some light coming in, but it's going to be extremely low. And what I usually recommend to people in that situation is to have a few plants that you switch in and out of that room over a period of months. So you might have a plant that's in there for a month and then you switch it out for an identical plant that you put somewhere else in the house, because ultimately plants in those very low light conditions will find it tricky. But you could have something moisture loving like a fern that doesn't mind quite a lot of shade, that say you have 2 or 3 of them and you could just have the plant in your bathroom for a month or 2 and then switch it out. You can also get grow lights now that fit into normal fittings. Obviously, make sure that you've checked them all with your electrician so you don't have any issues. But you can get grow lights now which will fit into normal light fittings. So you could have grow lights in there. LED ones are very efficient, but you're going to have them on 12 hours a day. So that's another thing to factor in. So it's tricky. And you're right. I get so annoyed by all these pictures of bathrooms with, very little natural light that are filled with plants, because you think that's not real. Or the other one is fiddle leaf figs on TV. Queer Eye is the one that really gets me. On Queer Eye, they've always got massive fiddle leaf figs in these living rooms in the corner away from any direct light. And I'm thinking, that's going to be dead in 2 months because that particular plant needs a lot of light. So yeah, there's a lot of bad placement of plants that you see online. So don't believe everything you see on Instagram, basically.
Yeah, a bit of false advertising, I suppose. But this idea of switching is brilliant, I think. I never thought about that before.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the thing to think about houseplants is that they're wonderful things, but they're not, they're not like a baby or a dog. They can be used flexibly. You are going to kill some, and that's okay. In the UK, we've got quite a strange attitude to plants, really, because in continental Europe, in the Netherlands and places, they buy a lot more plants and they are used to this idea of, okay, I'm going to buy this plant. It's going to last for 6 months and look beautiful. Oh, and then it's died. And they don't worry about that. Whereas, in the UK, I get people sending me pictures of like a dead twig and saying, what do I do to revive this? And the answer is, well, nothing. It's dead. Throw it away and get something else. So I think it's just a different attitude that we need to have. But yeah, switching plants about and moving them about can be useful. Some plants don't like to move. They like to be in one place and they will object if they're moved about. But other plants, like, for example, the cacti and succulents that I was mentioning, mine get moved at least twice a year because they spend the summer outside in my greenhouse and then they come inside in the winter. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with bringing the changes. And if you're into design and making your interior look good, then yes, if something's looking great, bring that forward, bring it to the fore, enjoy it somewhere you're going to be able to see it, and don't feel afraid of moving things around.
I love that idea. And, we shouldn't have one thing set in stone as well. So that idea that if you're working from home and you've got a home office, you can have plant 1 for, the first month of the year, and then you can switch it to plant 2. And it's like, I don't know, changing soap, the new scent, the new visual. It's just something that can bring you joy. And I'm always very jealous, I must say. It seems to be everybody has gone out and got a great plant, but behind their Zoom calls. Have you noticed it really taken off, Jane, since everybody started working from home?
Yes, I mean, the podcast's been going for just under 4 years now. And when I started because I could see that houseplants were coming up as a new trend. I've been growing houseplants since I was a kid. So for me, it was like, oh, great, everyone's catching on to this thing I've always been into. But then, so the podcast was kind of going along quite nicely and there was definitely building interest in houseplants. And then COVID hit and I think it just took it to another level of interest. Lots of people realising that they're at home, they want something nice to look at. and buying lots and lots of plants. And to some extent, some people have taken this to an extreme. They've bought a lot of plants in a very short amount of time. And I do fear for those people over the winter, because plants in the winter tend to struggle in our homes, because we whack the central heating on, the air becomes very dry, and lots of plants don't like dry air. So yeah, if you're struggling with your houseplants right now, then I sympathise.
So I have a very, very warm apartment, Jane. It's sort of, built in the last 10 years with all the latest building regulations.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So that might be, I feel vindicated now. And over Christmas, I had a friend put into my care their fern. And from day one, it just started to droop more and more and more. And it didn't seem to matter how much water I put on it. But is there like plants that I can use in my apartment, or is it a matter I just need to, because I think I drown them as well in terms of overwatering can be an issue. Could I have kept that fern in better condition in any way by more watering, or was it just a lost cause in a very warm apartment?
It's funny, when I go to somebody's house who's like got a house like yours, I find it quite bizarre, because I'm so used to my cold 1930s house. I'm literally like, I'm sweating here. Can you open the window? It's like the middle of winter. I'm just not cut out for these modern homes with good insulation. It's so funny. But on the plants, on the ferns are really tricky. I did a whole episode about like how tricky ferns are, because they need to be treated quite differently from a lot of other houseplants. Most other houseplants, I would say to you, I would be thinking about a watering regime where you're allowing the soil to dry out quite considerably before you water again. So what does that mean? Well, it means that even if you feel the surface of your compost when you're thinking about watering, and even if that feels dry, then that doesn't necessarily mean your plant needs watering, because down by the roots, a few inches down, it might still be very moist. And that's where the roots need to be, that's the roots you need to be thinking about. So I always say to people, use your finger, or you can use, in fact, I have one here, a wooden chopstick, and stick it way, way, way into the root ball. You won't harm the plant, and see if that comes out damp. And if it comes out damp, then the plant probably doesn't need watering. The other way to tell is you can buy a moisture meter, but a lot of them are quite rubbish, actually. Your finger is a better tool. But you can also tell by holding up the pot, and does it feel light as opposed to heavy. So there's different ways of telling, but most plants don't want to be watered until they're getting on the dry side. Ferns, however, are an exception. So with ferns, they do like constant moisture, but they don't want to be waterlogged either. So this is like the balancing act with ferns. And one of the best ways to try to grow ferns is using a self-watering pot. So I don't know if you've come across any of these. There's a few companies that make them. Lechuza is one. And these just have a reservoir of water and below the actual growing chamber, as it were. And they have some wicks that go down into that water, and so the plant's effectively sucking up the water it needs as it goes along. And this is great for ferns because it means that they're just constantly moist, but they're not big and they're not allowed to dry out at any point. And that is the key to making them happy. And actually, the other thing with ferns, although it's less of a problem if you've got that constant moisture, is just air humidity. So your apartment will probably be, I don't know if you can tell what the humidity is, but if you've got a humidity tester in there, you'd probably find it's about 40%. And that's really quite dry for a lot of houseplants. So how can you fix that? If you want to grow houseplants like ferns and a lot of the big-leaved calatheas and marantas that are so popular now, you've got to do something about the humidity levels. You need to get them up around at least about 50%. You can do that by grouping plants together, putting them in the more humid areas of your house, like the kitchen and the bathroom. And you can also stand plants or groups of plants on a tray covered with pebbles or gravel, and just water just up to the bottom of the top of that's the wrong word, but yeah, so that the gravel is just covered with water, then the plants can have the moist air that's being evaporated from that water coming up around them. So yeah, ferns are tricky though. I've killed so many ferns, and yeah, so I don't grow that many ferns now because I find they don't suit my style of cultivation really, and I have had a few problems with ferns over the years. I love them, but I just don't grow that many now for that reason. They're just too much hard work.
Jane, I love your honesty, and it's one of the things I like about your podcast is that you don't proclaim to be perfect, and I've never killed a plant in my life, so you're not intimidating for somebody like me. So I applaud your honesty.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to just be upfront with people, and the fact is that horticulture is an interesting thing because it's a mix of science and culture and art, and so there's different things coming in there, and one person will tell you, oh, this is how I grow my whatever, and it'll be totally different from the care instructions you've had from somebody else, and yet their plant is thriving, and the other, both plants are thriving in totally different setups. So it's one of those things where you've kind of got to find what works for you and kind of know the rules, but also be prepared to experiment and try breaking them as well.
Yeah, I think, Deirdre, you and I are going to have to invest in some of these self-watering pots. I
wish I had one to show you. I don't have one. The other thing you can do is that you, if you don't want to spend money on the buying they're quite expensive to buy these self-watering pots, but you can do a little home hack, which is if you get one of those, well, the Americans call them deli pots. If you go and buy olives in a deli and they put them in those clear plastic pots. So you get one of those, and then you get some, like, this sounds ridiculous, but when you get a gift bag and the strings of the gift bag are like that nylon cord, get some of that nylon cord, cut it to about 10 centimeters long, put get one or two of those stretches of cord, stick them inside through the holes at the bottom of your pot, and then make a hole in the top of your deli pot and fill it with water. And then you can cover that whole thing with an attractive outer pot. It'll obviously need to be like a little bit deeper, and you've made your own self-watering pot, and all you need to do is keep that reservoir topped up, and that's an easy, cheap way of doing it. And I do actually have a lot of those for a particular kind of plant that I grow, which are part of the Gesneriad family, which includes most famously the African violets. So yeah, that's a really cheap, I'm a bit of a cheapskate. I don't like spending a lot of money on pots, so that's usually how I do the self-watering pot.
Yeah, I think you sort of get a little kick from it as well, don't you? I've created my own. It actually reminds me of, I don't know if you've been to Mexico, but they have a lot of cenotes, which are like underground, apparently where the meteors came in, and they're little watering underground lakes. But with them all, I was really amazed because all of the trees above the ground, you had the roots coming way down, even though you couldn't, you're in an underground sort of watering cave, but all of the roots are just coming down to drink up the water.
So it sounds amazing.
Like pretty much how the self-watering works, as I'm imagining.
And this is a key point. We're going to go a bit technical here, but this is a really important point with houseplants. Loads of houseplants are what we call epiphytes. So an epiphyte is a plant that doesn't grow in the ground, it grows in a tree. So it's a plant that puts its roots down into a nook and cranny on a tree, or sometimes a rock, which are called lithophytes, and finds a little nook and cranny in that tree and grows there. And that's really important because it's telling us quite a lot about how to take care of that plant. So for example, as an example, Hoyas are the wax plant or the wax flower are becoming really popular right now, and you're starting to see a lot of these Hoyas and also a lot of the aroids that we kind of are going nuts for in the last year. So members of plants like the monsteras and the anthuriums, a lot of these are epiphytes. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that they don't have a very big root run. They're not in the ground where the roots are spreading out for miles. So that's telling us that they don't need a massive pot. They can cope well with being grown as houseplants, but also when they get rained on a lot, but the water drains away immediately. It doesn't hang around. So that's telling us a lot about how those epiphytes need to be kept as houseplants. So yeah, it's worth doing your research and finding out a bit about how plants grow in the wild, which helps you understand how to grow them indoors.
And kind of relating to that subject, Jane, are there plants that, one might grow indoors and then transfer outdoors? Or does that not really become a thing? Yeah,
there are. I mean, many people put lots of their houseplants outside during the summer months. So wherever you are, whenever your climate gets such that the minimum temperature overnight is about 10 degrees to 15 degrees Celsius or 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, you can put your houseplants outside. The main thing that people do, though, is they forget that light levels outside are massively higher than they are inside. So you need to put them in the deep shade outside to start with and gradually put them in more light as they get acclimatized. And you might want to start putting them out just a few hours a day. So a lot of houseplants can benefit from being outside during that time. There are also a few houseplants which can grow inside or outside any time of year. In other words, they're hardy garden plants. There's not many of them, but one of them is the very popular Oxalis triangularis, the purple shamrock with the beautiful shamrock-shaped purple leaves. Another one is the strawberry saxifrage, which is a lovely rosette plant which produces lots of babies on the end of these long thin stems called stolons, and that's one of my favourite species, and that grows really well inside and out. And I love those plants because it means if you've got a really cold room or an unheated room or a porch, those plants will grow really well there.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to get you to send me the name of those. I've written it down here, but I'm assuming that my spelling is way off. What would actually help me to find it?
Although purple shamrock, I think we might remember that one. That's sounding sort of Irish with a twist, I think.
That's how I've written it down. OXA ... purple shamrock.
Excellent.
Quick shout out for our sponsor, checkatrade.com. Search recommended tradespeople online with checkatrade.com.
And I can't resist asking you, Jane. As I think you've gathered so far, myself and Deirdre both share sort of being absolute novices when it comes to plants, and kind of, I suppose, having been discouraged from killing so many plants, where we've become very cautious. But one thing I've always wondered about is, I do have this bamboo plant, which I bought in 2005 when I got myself and my now husband, moved into our first home together. It was one of the first things we bought, and we still have it, but I've never managed to keep any other plants alive. So I wondered, is there something in particular about bamboo that might, have caused this resilience, or
yeah, is it? Tell me what it looks like. Is it like green canes with little green leaves on it?
Yeah, it's actually,
what does it look like?
Yeah, so it's got brown canes, if that's the word for the sort of trunky bits. And then the leaves are green, and it's grown quite a bit. I mean, I'd say quite a bit. I mean, given that it's over 15 years old, actually, it's probably just grown like a max of maybe 7 or 8 centimetres in height. But every so often, some of the leaves will die. And I learned from a cleaner we had many years ago to pull the leaves off when they died, and that would sort of help it. So I do that every so often. It was looking particularly miserable about a week ago, and I think because I was conscious about the podcast coming up, and I thought, oh my gosh, I really want to at least make it today without having to admit that the one and only thing is now dead. But I forget to water it. It gets watered so rarely, but perhaps it doesn't need to be watered that much.
Well, I'm going to blow your mind now, because I don't think that's a bamboo.
Ah, okay.
Well, I mean, it's possible that somebody somewhere is growing an actual bamboo indoors for that length of time, but bamboo really doesn't like being actual bamboo doesn't really like being indoors. I suspect you've got the reason why people get confused is because bamboo obviously is a common name that's applied to things that aren't bamboo. And this is a real issue in the world of houseplants because there's lots of plants which are called begonia, which aren't begonias. The saxifraga I just mentioned is called strawberry begonia. It's not a begonia. Anyway, the reason why that's important is because it does actually help you to know what you're looking after. I wonder if you've actually got a yucca. If it's got brown stems and green, is it like a... Well, anyway, it could be a yucca. It could also be what's called lucky bamboo, which is actually a kind of dracaena. I'd have to look at a photo of the plant, but it sounds like it's very durable. It sounds like one of those plants where if it's getting out of hand or if it's getting a bit, looking a bit rubbish, it sounds like one of those plants, if it is a dracaena, that you can literally just hack the top off it and it will regrow, which is one of the great things about those plants. So, you know, if you ever go into like a cafe or something and it's got like this plant that's kind of got trunks going everywhere, like any of those plants very easily can be just renovated by hacking back those stems. But people are often quite scared to do that kind of thing with houseplants, but it really can work quite effectively. So I think you've probably got some lucky bamboo or maybe a yucca. Send me a photo and I'll be able to I'm intrigued now.
I'm so curious now. I will do. I'll check it. Yeah. Continue the investigation.
Jane, going on to different rooms of the house. So we've talked about the bathroom, we've talked about the light, we can move plants around, making sure we're enjoying them. Is there any ones? I'm particularly interested in the science of obviously converting carbon dioxide into oxygen. So around your sleep, your bedroom, lots of people mention lavender, but is there particular plants that are good for creating the perfect sleeping zone?
Well, there's an old story that it's a bad idea to have houseplants in your bedroom because they take in oxygen at night and give out carbon dioxide. Now, if this were true, then you should not be sleeping with your dog, husband, wife, partner, child, because the amount of carbon dioxide that a plant's going to be giving out at night is very small. And this is also, and then people say, okay, well, have a snake plant, because there is this amazing thing which I talk about on the show quite a lot, on my show, which means that lots of succulents actually give out oxygen at night. And they say, oh, have a snake plant because it's giving out oxygen. Now, really, just open the window. Just open the window, because the amount of oxygen it's giving out is so small. It's like a tiny amount. So really, and this also applies to plants filtering the air. I mean, I did a whole episode on this. Like, there's a lot of misinformation out there about plants and their effect on the environment. The things that you can do to improve your indoor air quality are stop using air freshener plug-in things. Don't have a wood burning stove. Open your windows. Don't burn candles. Those are the things you can do to improve your air quality. Plants aren't really going to make much of a dent into your air quality unless you are literally living in a jungle. I mean, you'd have to have hundreds of plants in a room. Now that sounds rather negative. Plants are great, and yes, they will have a very, very small impact on your room's air quality. And there is more research going on about the way that they can filter certain volatile organic compounds. So I'm not being too negative about that, but don't assume that because you've put a peace lily in your bedroom that everything's great. Because it doesn't make enough of a difference.
So it's the placebo effect, maybe.
Yeah, probably is and there are massive benefits from having plants around. That has been proven. There's an idea called Biophilia, and this has actually been tested that having greenery around you lifts your mood, and in fact, research has been done showing that it can help post-operative patients heal more quickly. So those are the reasons to have the house plants, but don't expect that just putting a plant in a room will suddenly improve your air quality, because that really isn't realistic. But what I would say with plants in bedrooms is I would say just be a little bit careful, because bedrooms tend to be the most soft furnishing type environments in our homes now. A lot of us have got wooden floors and things everywhere else, but we've still got carpet. Trust me, dropping a load of soil on your bedroom carpet it's a nightmare. So think carefully about what plants you put there, how much maintenance they're going to need, and how much sort of fiddling about with them you're going to have to do. Ideally, go for things that are going to be able to sit there and be quite happy and low maintenance for a long period of time. Again, look at the aspect, are you going to have your curtains shut? Plants won't live if you're not going to let natural light into that room. But there's loads of great things that you can put in your bedroom. Just depends again on how the aspect of the room is situated and how much light there is and how big the windows are. But I love having plants in the bedroom. Just don't do what I did in a previous house, which is I had plants on a shelf above my bed, and I had a nightmare where I literally just stood up in bed and started grabbing onto the plants that were above me and bringing them down on the head of my very shocked partner. And yeah, that was not a good incident. So yeah, just take a little bit of care with positioning of your plants.
I thought you were going to tell me you had a nightmare where the shelf fell down on top of you, but
well,
at least you were safe.
The plants were, we ended up with plants on us, but no shelf, fortunately. I mean, that's the other thing to say is, be inventive and do use walls and extra space, because, most of us don't have a lot of room to maneuver in our bedrooms. So, keeping things off the floor can be much more efficient. And there's lots of different options for doing that now.
Yeah, I think, I love the idea of plants on shelves, actually. And we've seen a lot of imagery around that at the moment with sort of, trailing plants that sort of hang down off of shelves. It could be a nice way to bring in kind of extra colour and texture into a room. But actually, funny enough, you mentioned the word biophilia. I'd been thinking I'd love to ask you about that, because I've been reading a bit more about, not just sort of the health benefits that people have talked about sort of more traditionally, I suppose, are around air quality and things, which it's great to hear that, we don't need to be sort of so conscious or hyped up about, whether or not we're doing that. But the thing I'm becoming quite fascinated about is the biophilic aspect in terms of visually, and how our brains respond to those kind of organic patterns and shapes that are created by foliage. And to the point where now I've noticed, some people are writing about, doing this kind of artificially as well. So through maybe wallpapers or murals or other things that actually capture that essence. And it's something to do with the irregular nature of the patterns and how we kind of respond positively to them. Is that something that you've kind of delved into at all?
I think I did a couple of interviews about biophilia with some biophilia experts, and they said that there is no substitute for actually getting out into nature. That's the kind of top level. Like, if you really want to do the biophilia thing, go for a walk in a forest. Amazing. But obviously not all of us can do that all the time. Not all of us have access to outside green spaces. So it's really important to green up interiors. And you can, there's a huge industry of, I'm sure, as you know, like houseplant themed wallpaper and accessories. It's amazing what you can get now. I saw some beautiful leaf shaped cushions the other day, which are amazing. So you can do all that kind of stuff, and that's a positive too. But for me, there's no real replacement for an actual plant, which is like one of the great things about it is that it's just ever changing, and you can observe the changes in your plant. And I like plants actually that don't stay the same throughout the year, but actually flower. So this is a bit of an unpopular view, because flowering houseplants aren't as popular as foliage houseplants, but I do love plants that will suddenly burst into flower. So I've got some hippeastrum bulbs that are probably more commonly known as the amaryllis, those tall trumpet flowers that people grow at Christmas, and they're just minor ones that I grew last Christmas, and they're a bit late, but they're just coming into bud now, and it's just so exciting to see them opening up, and you can watch them day by day as they grow, and that's just really nice. I love to have those changes going on. And also scent. There are some flowering houseplants, particularly the Hoyas, that will fill your house with this incredible scent. I'm a bit evangelical about hating air fresheners here, but like, don't have air fresheners, get yourself some flowering Hoyas, and you get these wonderful scents filling your house. And if you don't like Hoyas, you could go for something much more simple like hyacinths. Grow hyacinth bulbs inside, or grow paper white narcissi. So there's lots of different ways of bringing plants in that will add scent to your house, colour, also texture. I mean, I've got a plant here this is a weird one, that is a member of it's a bit of an odd one. You wouldn't want to grow this plant for scent because the flowers of this plant smell like rotting meat. It's not currently flowering, thank goodness, but it's a succulent, and it's got the softest, velvetiest stems you could imagine. And if you're feeling a bit stressed, you could just give this plant a little bit of a stroke, and it's lovely. It's a really tactile plant, and so you can get enjoyment of handling your plants as well. On the other hand, I've got another plant here which is a cactus that's got tiny, velvety looking but lethal spines that you really don't want to touch. So again, know your stuff and don't touch before you check whether something's gonna spike you.
It's amazing, Jane. You're bringing back a lot of memories of things I've completely forgotten about. So I know there was one plant, and it has this lovely sort of red little flower on it, and it had a little capsule. And I remember somebody took one off, and they actually squeezed the capsule onto my wrist because it was like a perfume. They were getting the scent. And then you're talking about the feel, and we had one. We used to call it rabbit's ears, but I think I Googled it, and it's like a lamb's ear. But it's so velvety soft. And whenever I see a plant, I always sort of break off a leaf and I'm just rubbing it for a little while. But it's just such a beautiful feel of velvet.
I mean, this is another really velvety plant. This is a calanco. So this is a relative of that very popular plant that you see in every supermarket for sale. The Calanco blossfeldiana, a flowering succulent. But this one has just got these amazing coppery leaves that are just like velvet, and you could just sit here and have a stroke. It's lovely. I'm making myself sound very odd now, but in these sort of times where we're all kind of in an odd situation, actually there's a lot of pleasure to be had from just, if you've got a glossy leaved plant, and this is actually a good thing to do maintenance wise, just get a damp cloth, your glossy leaved plant, and just spend a few minutes giving it a wipe down, and your plant will grow better. And that's a mindfulness activity if ever there was one. So lots of my listeners find tending their plants very, very relaxing and a really nice break from the stresses of life.
So speaking of rubbing the plant, I'm thinking of if you're rubbing an animal, you've got a dog or a cat, or maybe even kids. Is there any plants that are poisonous for little people or little animals that we should avoid?
Well, loads. Absolutely loads. So again, this is where I say to people, do your flipping research. If you've got a child who is going to be tearing off leaves and putting them in their mouth, please, please, please do your research. If you've got a cat that likes nibbling at things, again, do you want hundreds of pounds of vet bills? Because that's what you're going to get if your cat chews certain plants. Because there are a lot of houseplants that are really quite toxic. Now, my children are old enough and have always been trained not to touch plants in that way, so that's fine. But and my dog doesn't bother with anything, so that's fine. And I know lots of people who successfully have loads of houseplants, many of which are toxic, and they have a cat, and it's all fine. But if you're bringing a new pet into the house and you've got existing houseplants, yes, you do need to go through and check them all, because there are lots that contain stuff that will quite quickly kill your pet. That sounds a bit harsh, but it's true. And so you need to be really, really careful. There's a good website. The American version of the RSPCA, the ASPCA, has a very good website on toxic plants. And you can go in and plug in the name of your plant and it will tell you which animals it's toxic to. And lots of things that we grow commonly are toxic. So, for example, there's a plant called the dumb cane or Dieffenbachia, which is a popular foliage house plant with kind of mottled green and cream leaves. Beautiful plant. But if you put that in your mouth, or even if you get the sap from it on your hands, if you are fiddling about with it and then you touch your eyes or your face, it makes your mouth swell up, which is why it's called dumb cane, because it stops you from speaking. And it's really quite toxic. So that plant, if you've got toddlers who are going to be exploring plants and putting things in their mouth, either don't have it or have it up high where they can't get to it, because it's really quite lethal. Lots of the members of that aroid family contain substances that are not very good for humans. I'm making it sound quite scary, but what I would say is there's very few cases of houseplant poisoning every year. Most of the time, children and even pets will spit out the plant once they've just put it on their tongue, because they taste incredibly bitter. So lots of these plants are designed to tell wildlife, don't eat me because I taste horrible and I'm poisonous. So most people will not be having a major problem, because even if they touch it onto their tongue, they'll very quickly realise that it tastes yucky. That said, toddlers have a different set of taste buds to the rest of us, so you do need to be careful, you really do. But look up your plants and figure out what is toxic and what isn't. There's lots of plants that are not toxic, is the good news as well. So it's worth checking that out. And in fact, there's a few house plants that are even edible by humans. So in fact, that purple shamrock that I told you about, that's actually tastes like sharp lemon sherbet taste. So you can put a few of those leaves on your salad if you wish to. Again, a slight warning in that everything's got a downside. They contain a lot of oxalic acid, like rhubarb does. So if you've got gout and certain other conditions, you can't eat that too much. But you'd have to eat pounds of it, to be honest. It's not a problem. But yeah, be careful with your house plants and think about, I think we kind of tend to think, well, it's a plant, so it's going to be okay. But do your research and figure out what plants you can safely have around, because there are loads that will be fine. I hope I haven't scared you too much by that.
No, I think it's just do your research. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. And, with pets especially, like lilies are a big one. If you have any kind of lily, whether it's a cut flower or a plant, they are very, very poisonous to lilies and to cats. And that's one of the main vets, I've been told by vets that's one of the main reasons they see very poorly cats coming in, is because they've eaten lilies. So that's a real sort of headline one to look out for.
Yeah, so really good to do the research on that subject then. I'm conscious of time, Jane, that we're coming to the end of our time together, but there was something that I really wanted to ask you, and it was about, I suppose inspired by, what I was saying earlier, that both Deirdre and I have found, just the whole topic of keeping plants alive can be quite challenging. And I was wondering about sort of the fact that perhaps for a lot of people, they're good at this because it's like a part of their ritual or their routine in the day. Is that something you think is true, or any kind of tips around that?
I hear a lot of people saying that to me, that, they have a houseplant ritual. I would say particularly right now, I am not really a ritual person. I am oh my God, that plant needs some water. Quick, throw some water on it. Because I'm leading a busy life. I've got other things going on. I would love to be, at some point in my life, I'm hoping that when I'm retired, I can sit and I can have my glorious houseplant rituals. But most of the time it's kind of firefighting. Do you know what I mean? And that's okay. That's fine. If you can get into a routine with watering your plants and with caring for your plants, then I think that's great. Don't just think, oh, it's Sunday, it's my houseplant watering ritual, so I'm going to water every houseplant in the room, because as I explained before, some of them probably won't need watering. But at the same time, if you can have a few plants around you while you're working, then it's a great way to remind yourself to take 5 minutes off to, just sit with your plant and have a little look at it. I've actually just looking at this plant that I was stroking, seen a mealybug on here, which is a pest that I now need to remove. So again, by just holding that plant and looking at it for 2 minutes, I've identified a problem, which is only just starting and I can fix quite easily. And if I'd have left that and not touched that plant, it might have got a lot worse. So yeah, spend time with your plants, enjoy them. And the more you look at them, the more you'll learn. So if you've got new plants and you're not very confident, put your plants in your eye line. So where you spend a lot of time during the day, whether it's your armchair or by the kettle or by the sink, have your plants at eye level so that you can notice any changes really quickly and pick them up straight away and see the mealybug or see that they're wilting. And that will allow you to keep them going much better.
Oh, well, that's great, Jane. I have to say, I'm feeling really inspired by the firefighting approach. I feel like I can,
oh my gosh.
I can possibly do this.
Yeah, I mean, I do try and, the weekend I will kind of set aside a couple of hours. But, I posted this on Instagram recently. I'm like, this is the reality of houseplant care. And literally the whole floor in here was just covered in soil and pots. And I was really getting into it and I really enjoyed myself, but it was chaos. But yeah, most of the time you're just trying to fit it into our busy lives. And that's the other thing I'd say is, make sure that the plants you choose, just start off small, master one plant and then move on to another one. Don't be tempted to buy 50 plants and think you can care for them all, because when you're starting out, you'll get overwhelmed and then everything will die and it's a bit sad.
One last question, Jane, from me. So start off with one plant. Where should we buy that one plant? Should we be looking at it in the flesh or can we buy it online? What's your perspective on that?
Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother show, but I'll just give a brief answer. If you can, I mean, we have all been into a supermarket. Maybe you haven't, but lots of people go into a supermarket and they see a plant and they think, oh my God, I love it. I'm going to buy it. It's only £2. But there is a good argument to say support your local nurseries and garden centres. For a start, you'll be able to get excellent advice in those places. I don't know where you are, you've got these boutique houseplant shops as well, but they're offering a really good service, expert advice, a wonderful environment to buy the plants. So yes, well, okay, it's fine to, grab a moth orchid when you go to Tesco or whatever. If you can buy plants from specialists, that's really great. And mail order is great as well, but it's fraught with potential problems. So, we all know, deliveries can go awry. It's a living thing. It's not going to survive for weeks in a box. It can get crushed, burnt, fried in the summer, frozen in the winter. So think very carefully before you do mail order and make sure you go for as reliable a firm as possible. But that is a way that lots of people end up with rarer plants that they can't get hold of otherwise. But the other thing I'd say, one final thing to say on this is, if you go to somebody else's house who's a plant enthusiast, totally take advantage of that and say to them, can I have a cutting of that beautiful plant? And that's one of the wonderful things about houseplant people. We're very generous. So if you come to my house and you say that, you'll end up leaving with a box of cuttings. And that's a really great way to start a collection because A, it's free. B, you'll hopefully get some care tips from the person and you'll learn about the plant through growing it on.
I'll be over as soon as lockdown is over, Jane.
That's exactly what I was thinking. We'll do another episode. Wink, wink.
Yeah, sure.
An uninvited guest.
Well, actually, it's true. I've got a lot of plants that haven't been hacked back for a while because I haven't had people visiting going, oh, can I have some of that? So.
Oh, Jane, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge, all your wisdom. It's been so inspiring. And I have to say, I feel really ready now to go out and embrace this whole new chapter of my interiors, I think. So yeah, lots of great things to think about. And yeah, loving the tips around switching the plants around and how to test the moisture and being able to create our own self-watering pots. So I'll be definitely giving all of those a go. So thank you again, Jane.
My pleasure. Nice to speak to you.
If you enjoyed our podcast, we would be delighted if you could rate, review and subscribe on your favourite podcast provider. This will help others who are seeking home and furnishing advice and inspiration discover the DNA of home interiors. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter at the DNA of Home Interiors.
If you are looking for inspiration and help in designing your home interiors, take a look at Audrey Whelan's masterclasses on audreywhelan.com/events. And don't forget to check out youfurnish.com, a search and comparison website which helps connect people with amazing furniture from over 100 retailers. We designed it to solve the problem we and thousands like us faced furnishing our homes. And now we are really excited that everyone can search, discover, compare and shop for their home all in one place.
Thank you to our sponsor checkatrade.com for their support in bringing this episode to you. And most importantly, thank you all for listening today.
We hope you can join us next time.